you mentioned that you've become a public face since October 7th, and I saw that you recently spoke again with Alan Dershowitz, and this connects to your publication career because I might have mentioned this in our last conversation, but a professor of mine at Stanford many, many years ago, he was on some sort of committee or something where you were trying to get a book published with the University of California Press, I believe. And because there was this immense pressure from, I believe it was Alan Dershowitz at this time.
Yeah, he threatened to sue them.
Right. The University of California Press, they went over your book. They had all sorts of reviewers with a really fine-tooth comb, and they could find no errors with it whatsoever.
There are no errors in my book.
And I just wanted to ask a bit about...
And that was a long book.
Yeah, because I don't think our viewers may know the backstory between you and Dershowitz and then this
Professor
book.
Dershowitz, at the time, he went to the governor of California, who was Arnold Schwarzenegger. And because University of California Press is under the Board of Regents, and Arnold Schwarzenegger was technically a member of the Board of Regents, he had the power to stop the publication of the book.
But what was the book? What was the whole ordeal for our listeners who aren't aware of this?
Oh, yeah, that's a good question, which I just assumed. Professor Dershowitz wrote a book called The Case for Israel, and I alleged that large parts of the book had been plagiarized, and the rest had been a falsification, misrepresentation of the documentary record. And so I just sat down, as I normally do, because that was a serious allegation, a serious accusation. I made it on public radio, a program called Democracy Now!, in which he was my interlocutor and I was his interlocutor. And since there was a gravity to the accusation, and you obviously can't demonstrate it in any kind of substantive way in the course of a radio conversation, I felt I had a scholarly, a professional obligation to document my allegations. And so I sat down and I wrote a quite substantial volume called Beyond Chutzpah on the misuse of anti-Semitism and the abuse of history. And the last larger part of the book, it's called Part 2, so it runs from pages 89 to 408, so approximately 300 pages, was given over line by line, by line, going through his allegations in his case for Israel and demonstrated that they were all false. They were either fabrications, misrepresentations, depending on the particular statement he made. And then on the issue of the plagiarism, there was an interesting follow-up. There was a fellow named Frank Menetrez, and he had heard about my allegations, and he was curious. He's not a radical person at all. He's right now a state judge in California. You can Google him, Frank, Menetrez. He's a state judge, not at all radical, but serious scholar. He was the editor. He has his PhD and his JD from UCLA, and he was the editor of the Law Journal. Serious guy. He was curious who was telling the truth. He has a very simple title, Dershowitz versus Finkelstein, Who's Right and Who's Wrong? And he went through all the evidence on the plagiarism. And he writes at the end, I'll read it, a very ridiculous article. It runs to, 363, 39. It runs to 30 pages of tiny text. And the last paragraph, he writes, and he talks about what he destroyed my career, Professor Dershowitz. That's a plausible claim. And he writes, Now that Dershowitz's misrepresentations have been exposed, Harvard cannot permit them to go uncorrected. For your audience, he was the senior-most professor at Harvard Law School, Alan Dershowitz. If someone were revealed to falsely claiming to be a Harvard professor, perhaps making speeches or writing letters of recommendation in Harvard's name, Harvard would never stand for it. The university would issue an official statement setting the record straight. Dershowitz's deceptions are no less serious. He has sought to sabotage Finkelstein's tenure case on the basis of an official exoneration by Harvard. Harvard said he wasn't guilty of the claims I made. On one of Finkelstein's central allegations, apparently never took place. I do not mean to be suggesting whether or in what way Harvard should discipline Dershowitz for the misconduct I have described. How Harvard addresses misbehavior by its faculty members is Harvard's business, not mine. But this is not just between Harvard and Dershowitz, or between Dershowitz and Finkelstein. Rather, Harvard has a moral obligation to Finkelstein to acknowledge, at a bare minimum, that has never completely cleared Dershowitz of Finkelstein's plagiarism charges because it has never rejected Finkelstein's argument concerning the identical errors in the case for Israel, his book, and from time immemorial, from which he plagiarized.
That was a bad move.
Bad move. to plagiarize from that book, at least bad move as regards me. And the same thing happened, the greatest historian on the Nazi Holocaust was Al Hilberg. He was a right-wing Republican, but he stood by me. He stood by me. Do you know what he said?
No.
Oh, okay, so...
It's impressive that a right-wing historian is standing by. That suggests that
I've never understood it. For your listeners, I don't know where the camera is, but this is his famous 3-volume The Destruction of the European Jewry. I have it in several editions. Now, obviously, Professor Hilberg owed me nothing, and by virtue of politics, we were way on different sides of the spectrum. So far apart that we probably could have met. But here's what he said when he was asked about my tenure case. Let me say at the outset, I would not unasked offer advice to the university in which he now serves. Having been in a university for 35 years myself and engaged in its politics, I know that outside interferences are most unwelcome. I will say, however, that I am impressed by the analytical abilities of Finkelstein. He is, when all is said and done, a highly trained political scientist who was given a PhD degree by a highly prestigious university. That should not be overlooked. Granted, this, by itself, may not establish him as a scholar. However, leaving the question of style, the fire thrower, leaving the question of style, and here I agree, that's not my style either. Leaving that aside, the substance of the matter is most important here, particularly because Finkelstein, when he published this book, The Holocaust Industry, which I was attacked for by the DePaul University administration during my tenure about it, the substance of the matter is most important here, particularly because Finkelstein, when he published his book, was alone. It takes an enormous amount of academic courage to speak the truth when no one else is out there to support him. And so I think that given this acuity of vision and analytical power, demonstrating that the Swiss banks, there was a whole question of whether the Swiss banks had robbed Holocaust survivors of their money, whether the Swiss banks did not owe the money, that even though survivors were beneficiaries of the funds that were distributed, they came, when all is said and done, from places that were not obligated to pay that money. The Swiss banks were forced to pay money, which they never stole. It was clear from the record. I went through it. That takes a great amount of courage in and of itself. So I would say that his place in the whole history of writing history is assured, and that those who in the end are proven right triumph, and he will be among those who will have triumphed, albeit it so seems at great cost. So I have my supporters also from unlikely places, very unlikely places.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing that somebody who, I mean, I don't know his work, but somebody that is so far from you on this spectrum.
And he was a Nazi Holocaust survivor. He left Austria in 1938. He fled. He was a child. His parents fled. And he was a right-wing Republican. But facts are facts. Truth is truth. You may not like Karl Marx's style, but Capital is a triumph of German science. It's an extraordinary work.
Just though to finish that story, and then we will wrap up. So your tenure battle was really compromised by politics. But what happened then with this book and the University of California Press and Dershowitz and Arnold Schwarzenegger?
I would say it was a complicated process and not worth going into the details. I had to make some compromises, but I didn't feel they were principled compromises. For a very simple reason. UC Press never doubted the veracity of what I was writing. UC Press is a university press. They have no money. You know? They said to me, I'm quoting them now, her name was Whitley. I forgot her first name, the director of the press. She said to me, if Professor Dershowitz sues you in New York, she said, we don't even have the money to fly out the staff to testify. He would bankrupt. And he said that. He said to the Boston Globe, quote, if UC Press publishes that book, I will own UC Press. And he sent a letter to UC Press saying, the issue of the plagiarism is in an appendix to the book. I'm quoting it now word for word. You wrote UC Press, if you don't remove the appendix now, it will be a very painful operation later. Like a mafia.